Greetings. Before we get started, I'd like to give a big thank you to the Ecuadorian American Cultural Center for providing footage from Ayazamana, traditional music and dances from Ecuador. I hope you enjoyed this very special glimpse at the Feast of the Sun, also known as Inti Raymi. Dance to the most emblematic Ecuadorian rhythm, this harvest celebration is the most important festivity in the Andes. Let's do a quick sound check. If you can hear me, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Okay, great. Everyone can please lower their hand now. We will not use that function for the remainder of the webinar. Welcome to the Fiscal 2027 Cultural Development Fund Application webinar. I am Audrey St. Clair. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the Assistant Commissioner of Program Services at the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. I will turn on my camera so that you can see me. I am a Black woman with brown skin, short black curly hair, and gold earrings and a gold sweater. So I will turn off my camera so that we can continue. As an employee of the City of New York, I acknowledge with gratitude the ancient and current stewards of the lands and waters we currently know as the 5 boroughs, which had been cared for over millennia by Lenape, Canarsie, Lakawe, Wappinger, Matinecock, and Schaghticoke people. We also recognize that New York City has one of the largest urban Native American indigenous populations in the United States. My fellow presenters and DCLA program staff behind the scenes will work together to present this webinar and answer your questions. This seminar will provide an overview to guide you on submitting an eligible application to the Department of Cultural Affairs for fiscal year 2027. Please note that CDF receives hundreds of applications each year. Today's webinar is designed to help you navigate that highly competitive process. We hope you will implement the information to write a compelling cultural proposal detailing how you will serve NYC in alignment with your organization's mission. Also note that previous funding is not a guarantee of future funding, so do your best to submit a comprehensive application that is responsive to the evaluative criteria. In addition to today's webinar, we have several other resources to guide you through the application process. If you have not done so already, we suggest you download the CDF Guidelines, the CDF Application Worksheet, and the Budget Worksheet, which can all be found on our Applying page. The Application Worksheet contains the complete text of the application, both questions and instructions, and the Budget Worksheet contains help text and formulas. We've also put together a recorded budget tutorial for those of you who would like additional guidance on completing the budget sections of the application. These resources can be found on our Applying page, which is linked in the chat. These resources will be referenced throughout the presentation, and we will go into more depth about how they can be used. Next slide, please. A note on accessibility. We've created this presentation with accessibility in mind. For a closed captions version of this webinar, please click on the Show Captions icon at the bottom of your window. A copy of this presentation that is accessible by screen readers may be requested via email to disabilityfacilitator@culture.nyc.gov. You can find this email in the chat. We'd like to let all attendees know that this event will be recorded. This webinar will be posted with closed captioning on DCLA's YouTube channel in the coming days. DCLA will link to this video from our website, and you may use all or part of the recording in the future or authorize others to use it for non-commercial purposes consistent with our mission. If you do not wish for your name to be included in this recording, please direct all communications to CDF Help Desk at culture.nyc.gov rather than using the Q&A feature of this presentation. Once we have gone over the webinar agenda, which will be in the next 2 slides, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen for questions. Behind the scenes, we will monitor your questions throughout the webinar and reserve time to answer them in batches. If your question is specific to your organization, our programs team will answer you directly. If your question is more broadly applicable, we will respond to it live during the webinar for all to benefit from your question. So don't be shy. Next slide.
¿Tiene alguna pregunta en español? Puede pedir asistencia en español enviando un email al helpdesk al cdfhelpdesk@culture.nyc.gov. Su pregunta será contestada por uno de los Program Officers que hablan español lo más rápido posible.
Next slide, please. We've divided this presentation into several sections. My colleagues Claudia Arzino, Dylan Pickus, and Ladan Hamidi Tusi will give you an overview of the FY27 CDF grant cycle and the FY26 outcomes, discuss FY27 guidelines and eligibility, review the online application form, provide tips for crafting your project proposal and other narrative responses, discuss Create NYC initiatives and City Council discretionary funding, and provide guidance on completing your budgets and submitting your programmatic background materials and work samples. As mentioned, we will pause for questions throughout and will hold time at the end to answer any outstanding questions. If your query is related to any of the aforementioned areas, please hold until the applicable section to ask your question, as it will likely be covered. We strongly suggest that you stay for this entire presentation. I will now turn it over to Claudia. Next slide.
Thank you, Audrey. Hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Arzeno. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co-directors of the Program Services Unit here at DCLA. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I'm going to give you a visual description of myself for accessibility purposes. I am a Puerto Rican woman. I have dark brown hair, brown eyes. I'm wearing a shirt that's kind of cream and black, and I have the DCLA background, which is a step and repeat. It's got a blue background and DCLA in white letters. I will now turn my camera off until the Q&A. Okay, so DCLA will accept proposals in every artistic discipline and from all areas within New York City for services that take place within the 5 boroughs and within the city's fiscal year 27, which is July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027. The fundamental requirement for all proposals is that they represent a cultural activity of recognized quality that is accessible to the New York City public during the grant period. Funded services can be as different as the organizations providing them, but they will all have a common commitment to public service and public participation. Next slide, please. Here is the FY27 CDF grant cycle. The application became available on Monday, February 23rd, and the deadline to submit is Thursday, April 2nd at 5 p.m. There are no exceptions to this deadline. I'll repeat that because it's important. No exceptions to this deadline. Please ensure that you do not miss it. What happens once the CDF applications are submitted? DCLA program staff review the applications and confirm that each applicant's borough, discipline, and FY24 income are correctly indicated. We also check that all applicants are eligible and make sure that all of the required supplemental materials were submitted. After the applications are confirmed as complete and apportioned to a panel, they are submitted to panelists for review. We are now accepting submissions for prospective panelists through our website, so please consider participating as a panelist. Panelists should have considerable experience in the arts and culture sector in New York City. You can submit yourself at the link in the chat. DCLA's budget will be confirmed around the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1st, and panels will convene over the summer and early fall. Once they conclude, funding recommendations will be made according to the applicant's budget category and panel score percentile. The commissioner then reviews and approves funding allocations, and notifications will be sent via email in late fall or early winter. Further paperwork will be required of grantees. Typically, 80% of an award is paid as an initial payment and 20% upon completion of services once you submit your final report through payment, though payment schedules may vary in some instances. Grantees are required to report on CDF-funded activities every year. Online reporting forms become available around the end of the grant period, which is the city's fiscal year, so around mid to late June. And CDF final reports for FY27 will be due no later than August 2nd, 2027. Next slide, please. With New York City being the largest municipal arts funder in the country, the competitive, score-based, peer panel facilitated CDF process helps us realize our mandate to support a cultural community that reflects our city's immense diversity and truly serves every resident. As this is a competitive process, funding is not guaranteed year after year outside of a multi-year grant with a renewal baseline funding commitment. Our values of accessibility, equity, adaptability, advocacy, and accountability guide the CDF process to ensure fair and equitable distribution of CDF funds. In FY26, DCLA held 43 panels and awarded $66.7 million in grants for 1,171 cultural organizations across the 5 boroughs of New York City, distributed through our Cultural Developments Fund, which we also refer to as CDF. As part of that total, additional funding was provided to organizations operating in areas with the lowest median incomes and highest poverty rates, organizations bringing more cultural programming to audience whose primary language is not English, as well as English language learners, and organizations providing deeper cultural engagement for people with disabilities. To learn more about CDF policies, please visit the DCLA website. Next slide, please. The following are the basic requirements for eligibility for CDF funding. Your organization must be either a not-for-profit arts and culture organization or a not-for-profit organization for which arts and culture is a component of a broader mission. You must have successfully delivered arts and cultural services in New York City for the last 2 consecutive years. You need to be based in New York City and be able to demonstrate administrative and programmatic operations within any of the 5 boroughs of New York City. Your administrative address is primarily determined by the address listed on your IRS 990 for the fiscal year ending in 2024, with the organization's 501c3 letter and other publicly available information also taken into consideration. You must possess a unique Federal Employee Identification Number, or EIN. You are required to be certified as tax exempt under Internal Revenue Service Code Section 501c3, or be an incorporated not-for-profit that uses a DCLA pre-approved New York State Incorporated tax-exempt fiscal sponsor. Only not-for-profit organizations are eligible to apply, regardless of whether they use a fiscal sponsor. Additionally, you must be incorporated in New York State as a not-for-profit organization no later than the organization's fiscal year ending in 2024. Finally, you need to be compliant with annual state and federal filing requirements for not-for-profit organizations, including New York State Charities Bureau filings. Organizations whose incorporation dates are in fiscal year 25 or fiscal year 26 are not eligible to apply for this cycle. In this case, organizations must wait until they have a 2-year history to apply for the CDF. For support in fiscal year 27, these organizations should explore the DCLA re-grant program administered by the local arts councils in their borough. Contact information for the arts councils can be found on the DCLA website. Next slide, please. Crucially, if you have not provided services in arts and culture in both of the last 2 years in New York City and cannot demonstrate related income and expenses, you are not eligible to apply in fiscal year 27. Also, applicants cannot be individual artists or unincorporated artist collectives. There are DCLA re-grant funds administered by local arts councils on our behalf that are dedicated to individual artists. You must be incorporated as a not-for-profit. any other type of incorporated entity, including limited liability corporations, benefit corporations, S corporations, limited partnerships, are not eligible, even if they apply with a fiscal sponsor. Just not-for-profits are eligible. The following types of organizations are also not eligible to apply: parent-teacher associations or organizations, nonprofit organizations with chapters, offices, branches, or general activity in New York City, but that are administratively based outside of New York City, members of DCLA's Cultural Institutions Group, programs of city, state, or federal agencies, including component units of the City of New York, libraries or degree-granting institutions, or schools, including pre-K through grade 12, colleges, and universities. A note on this bullet point: if your organization is closely affiliated with such institutions, you should contact DCLA prior to applying to determine eligibility. Finally, organizations that are not in compliance with DCLA's previous grant reporting requirements are not eligible to apply. If you have questions about your organization's eligibility, you can take our eligibility quiz, which is linked in the chat and on our website. If you have further questions regarding your eligibility, please make sure you contact your program officer, if you have one, or the help desk well in advance of the April 2nd deadline. You can find the help desk email address in the chat, on the DCLA website, and in the guidelines. Next slide, please. We do consider applications from organizations whose primary mission is other than arts and culture. These are typically social and/or multi-service organizations, religious institutions, or organizations providing general non-arts education. We refer to these as non-arts and culture organizations. If you are an organization whose mission is to provide arts education, this doesn't apply to you. If you are a non-arts and culture organization, you must have offered documented arts and cultural programming over the past 2 years, provide written proof of any annual filing exemptions, select non-arts and culture as your organization type, which will prompt you to submit a full organizational budget, enter the budget for your cultural activities in the application, and submit your full organizational budget in a separate template. Your application will be reviewed based on the portion of your FY24 operating income that relates to your arts and cultural activities. It is imperative that you have separate financial and programmatic information available for the cultural component of your organization for all fiscal years since 2024. If you're not sure if your organization has this, please confirm with your bookkeeper that you can provide the required information prior to the April 2nd deadline. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm now going to pause here to answer some questions that have been flagged for me, and I'll turn on my video so you can see me while I do that. Okay. The first question is, can the proposal be an extension of a recently launched program or a modification of an existing program? Yes, absolutely. I would just say that with a recently launched program, you want to make sure that in your application, you explain very much in detail how you're going to do this, what the impact is, list any previous activities that might be related that give the panelists confidence that you can actually do this if it's a pilot program. If you want to talk to a program officer about what you're thinking of proposing or have any questions, please email the CDF help desk and we can talk about this further. Okay, next question. Are historical societies and archives considered libraries by your standards? No, we actually do fund historical societies, but again, if you have any questions about whether your organization would fall into a library, by libraries, we really just mean the New York City Public Library, so the New York City Public Library, the Brooklyn Public Library System. But again, any other questions that you have about whether your organization is related to a library, just contact the CDF help desk and we can talk about it further. How much funding dollar amount should be requested? So we will talk about this later on in the presentation, but if you look at the guidelines, you can see the different budget buckets, and you can see what budget bucket your organization falls under. This is going to be based on your fiscal year 24 990 if you are a cultural organization. If you are non-arts and culture, then it'll fall under your cultural income for fiscal year 24. In this budget bucket area of the guidelines, it gives you the minimum and the maximum for each budget bucket. So it should fall within the minimum and the maximum of your budget bucket. Next question. If we are receiving funds directly from NYSCA, are we eligible for this grant? Yes, you are. Next question. Can a project be eligible for funding if it takes place over 1 month during the fiscal year 27 grant period? Or does the project have to take place for the majority of July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027? Your project can take place at any point during that time period. It just has to fall within the fiscal year 27. It cannot fall outside of it. So if your project is partly in fiscal year 27 and partly outside of it, just ask for the portion of the project that falls within the city's fiscal year 27. Can one apply for general operating support as a cultural organization, or does it need to be for a specific program? This is a programmatic grant. It has to be for a specific program. As part of our programming, we award students with college scholarships. Can our funding be allocated towards this? It might be. I would ask you to please either contact your program officer if you have one, or the CDF help desk so we can get a little bit more detail and we can give you the correct answer. My organization has cycled out of our multi-year funding under the CDF. Can we apply for funding for the same program? Sure. Yes, you can apply for funding for the same program as long as it is taking place in New York City. It is a cultural program and it is taking place within the city's fiscal year. Okay, I am going to now turn my camera off and move on with the presentation. Please note these specific policies regarding CDF funding. Organizations may request support for a single project only. No more than 75% of the total project costs may come from DCLA. And if funded, organizations are expected to complete all programming as proposed, regardless of the amount awarded. Remember, while applicants request funds for unique programs and are evaluated on their public services, funds received from the CDF can be used to cover any administrative costs, such as staff salaries, space rentals, and insurance costs, spent in the execution of the project, except for capital expenditures, government advocacy efforts, or fundraising. Next slide, please. Public access during fiscal 2027 is a key component of activities funded by CDF. The guidelines contain a longer list of examples, but here are a few examples of activities CDF can fund. Creation of new work and/or restoration of existing work for public presentation. Arts education programs. Community-based cultural activities. Services that assist New York City's artists and arts organizations. Training programs. Presentation of works in progress. Virtual programs with a clear artistic service provided to New York City audiences. DCLA can fund any of these activities if the public access falls between July 1st, 2026 and June 30th, 2027, and within the 5 boroughs of New York City. Remember that funding received via the Department of Cultural Affairs must be for publicly accessible activities that are cultural in nature. We do include the humanities and natural sciences in our definition of culture, but not physical fitness, social services, or general education like college prep, language classes, or homework help. Please submit a question via the Q&A function or email your program officer or the help desk if you have questions about the eligibility of your project. Next slide, please. Keep in mind what we do not fund. Do not ask DCLA to support activities outside of the city's fiscal year or outside of the 5 boroughs. We expect you to fundraise, but we cannot fund you to do so. Capital projects, including equipment purchases and construction, fall under a different unit at DCLA. Please email capitalrequest@culture.nyc.gov for information about the capital unit. This email is also in the chat. Lobbying or other governmental advocacy can be helpful for organizations to receive funding from elected officials, but CDF funds may not be used towards those efforts. DCLA also does not fund proposals for internal capacity building. You must propose projects that provide services to the public. This also means that we do not fund general operating support. Your CDF proposed projects cannot include activities funded by City Council initiatives administered through this agency, such as CASA or the Cultural Immigrant Initiative. Be sure not to include any of these ineligible items in your project description. Next slide, please. Your FY27 application will be evaluated on 3 criteria. 35% of your score will be calculated on your application's evidence of public service and impact. Applications that score highly on this criterion are providing arts and/or cultural programming in the 5 boroughs of New York City during the grant period, with consideration toward accessibility, affordability, and equity. 35% of your score will be calculated on your application's evidence of organizational accountability. Applications that score highly on this criterion show that their organization demonstrates accountability, sustainability, and the capacity to provide cultural programs that are accessible, equitable, realistic, and relevant to their mission, focus, and audiences served. 30% of your score will be calculated based on evidence of quality in the execution of your proposed cultural programs. Consideration is informed by a relative standard that is appropriate to the participants in those disciplines and genres, and not in comparison to any single standard of excellence. Please see the guidelines for a full description of each criterion. You will see the application sections align closely with the criteria. Refer to the guidelines for more information about how the panelists use the different sections to assess your application against the evaluative criteria. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the minimum and maximum awards determined by the panel score in each budget category. This is in the guidelines, as I mentioned before during the Q&A. The competitive panel review will generate a final panel percentile score for each proposal. After DCLA's FY27 budget is adopted, available funding will be used to determine the percentage of applicants funded. Including organizations that are in a renewal, DCLA strives to continue to fund a high percentage of applicants. First-time grantees, defined as applicants that have not received a CDF baseline award in at least one of the last 6 fiscal years, are only eligible for a 1-year $10,000 baseline award, regardless of their budget size. Returning grantees who score above the funding threshold will be awarded the minimum allocation in their budget category, plus additional funding determined by their panel score percentile. Please note that organizations with budgets under $25,000 are only eligible for a $10,000 baseline award. Additional funds may be added according to agency priorities post-adoption, including for targeted funding sources such as the Language Access Fund, also referred to as LAF, and the Disability Forward Fund, also referred to as DFF. Next slide, please. Our multi-year award policy is as follows. If you did not receive a CDF baseline award within any of the 3 prior fiscal years, which would be fiscal year 24, fiscal year 25, or fiscal year 26, then you are only eligible for a single year award. If you received at least a CDF baseline award within the last 3 fiscal years, you will be automatically considered and eligible for a 3-year award. You don't have to check anything. You don't have to click on anything. If you have received a CDF baseline award within the last 3 fiscal years, you will automatically be considered. Recipients of 3-year awards must submit a complete and eligible renewal application for years 2 and 3 by the required renewal application date. Renewal applications are not subject to panel review. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to pause here and answer any questions that have come in. Can one organization apply for funding for more than one program in the same year? So you have to propose one project, but that project can have different components. So it could be, for example, if you are a theater, it can be your whole season, and you can then describe each of the productions that will be presented during that season. So it really depends on how you frame it and how you talk about it in your application. What is your definition of community-based? I'm sorry, I'm not sure what this is referring to, but please email the CDF help desk and we will clarify your question. What does it mean one project? We have typically requested funding for arts education, educator training, and concerts. Would it mean we need to pick, or would we need to show the single project is an alignment of these three? That is really up to you. The one project, as I mentioned before, can have multiple components. It can also just be one program. So it is up to you if you would like to request funding for your arts education, educator training, and concerts under the one project banner, or if you'd like to pick one. Next question. Our project is scheduled for late October, early November of 2026. Could this impact our request for funding as it may occur before funding is awarded? No, it shouldn't. So anyone who is eligible and submits an application can propose a project within the fiscal year. We understand that the panels might take place after your project has already taken place, but you just have to talk about your program in alignment with the criteria, give as much detail as possible, and it should not affect your project. That being said, you should be aware that payments usually don't go out until later in the year, so it would be more of a reimbursement basis if your project is taking place early in our fiscal year. If our project was presented in September, October 26, how will we know in advance we were awarded a grant if notification is fall winter 26? So you wouldn't. That's kind of what you need to consider. You would have to wait until notification is sent, and then if you're awarded, then you would receive an initial payment probably later in the year, and it would be in a reimbursement basis. How important is the projected number of people served in assessment of public service and impact? Does an event that serves 200 people have an advantage over an education program that serves 20 students over multiple sections, for example? We will talk about this in a little bit, but we fund both breadth and depth. So we can fund a concert that is serving 200 people, or we can serve a really focused, deep program that is serving, say, as your example, 20 students. It really just comes down to how you describe what the impact is, how detailed your project is, and how it aligns with the criteria. Okay. At this point, I will hand it over to my colleague, Dylan Pickus. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dylan Pickus. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a program officer here at DCLA. For a quick visual description for accessibility purposes, I'm a white man in his 30s. I'm wearing glasses, earbuds. I'm in front of the same step and repeat background that Claudia described earlier, and I'm wearing a blue button-down shirt. I'm going to go off camera very quickly, or I'm going to go off camera until a Q&A later in the webinar. The FY27 CDF application is a user-friendly online application that uses the Salesforce CRM system. All supplemental materials must be uploaded directly into the online form itself. If you encounter a technical issue with the application form, please submit the IT support form. The link to this IT support form can be found on our website. Next slide, please. This slide shows the login page for the CDF application portal found on the applying page of the DCLA website. For organizations that have never applied to the Department of Cultural Affairs for funding, users can register for a new account by clicking the Register New Account button. We will paste the links to the applying page and a registration help guide in the chat. This registration help guide can also be found on the DCLA website under About CDF/registration. Follow this guide for step-by-step instructions on how to set up an account for a new organization, add and remove users, and register for NYC ID. Next slide, please. On this slide is a screenshot of the NYC ID login page. This is the screen you will see when you launch the application from the DCLA website. Enter your email and password to access your CDF account. Our online security policies are aligned with NYC ID, which is New York City's centralized public identity management system. New and returning users will use NYC ID to log into their DCLA account. For more information on registration and NYC ID, please download that registration help guide from our website. Again, that link is the most recent one in the chat. Next slide, please. After you have logged in, you will be taken to the grants management dashboard for your organization. This slide includes a screenshot of that page, which shows your contact name, the organization's name, a navigation toolbar on the left, and all currently open grant applications. The first step for every applicant is to review the user information in your organization's account for accuracy and completeness. You can view this information by clicking User Management on the left-hand navigation bar. It is critical for all organizations to keep their account profile and registration information current at all times. Again, I'm going to point you towards that registration help guide for instructions on how to add, remove, and edit users. This portal is where all engagement with the CDF process will occur. Only your active users will receive correspondence, and the grants management dashboard will be Grand Central Station for all document management. Next slide, please. A side note, but an important one before we move off user management. To complete your application, you must have identified at least one user as an executive director by checking the executive director box in the user management section, which you can see circled here, and Jillian's hopefully pointing at it as well. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot of the launch page of the CDF application. As you see, the application is in 5 sections, plus the final step sections, which is at the bottom here and not shown on the screen. Each of the sections can be accessed by clicking a Get Started red button on the right. They could really read something different, but they say Get Started when you first launch the application. The application and its sections are designed to align with the evaluative criteria. You must complete the organization information section first, and you need to complete the first 5 sections before continuing to the final step section to submit your application. Some other things to remember. You will be logged out automatically after 30 minutes of inactivity. Please note that typing in an application field is not considered activity by our system. You must save or navigate to the next page within a 30-minute period to stay logged in. Save the page as you're working every few minutes, and disable any pop-up blockers to make sure that you receive an alert prior to being logged out. Note as well that the form does not automatically save. You will need to click Save at the top to save your application at any time, or Save and Next at the bottom to both save and navigate to the next page. Also, clicking Previous or Next at the top of the page will save your work. Up to 5 users can work on separate sections of the application at once. However, multiple users cannot work in the same section at the same time. Instructions for your responses will appear in a blue box below the question. Not all questions have instructions. Character count limits appear at the end of the question. Once you begin a section, it will be marked as in progress until complete. You can see that in the yellow text on the screenshot. Clicking Exit will bring you back to the home screen. To complete a section, you will need to click the Finish button at the end of the section. This will mark the section as complete on the home page, which you can see here. I'm going to play video here so you can see a demonstration of this next point. All sections remain editable until you submit the application. However, if you edit a complete section, it will change back to an in-progress status. Once you've made your edits, you can use the sidebar to go to the end and click Finish to mark it as complete again. So you see here, we clicked into that one complete section we had. We had an edit we wanted to make about our fellowship program. So we've gone to there and we're making an edit. We're going to hit save and next, but we're not going to click finish. We're just going to go straight back to the home screen. And now, as you see, that status is listed as in progress again. It is not listed as completed. Our work was saved, but the section still needs to be completed. So you can go to our navigation here, scroll down and hit that red finish button. And now, lo and behold, we're back to the completed status. Moving on, all questions with an asterisk are required. If you believe the question doesn't apply to you, type 0 or NA. Do not submit your application in the 6th section until you're sure the application is ready for submission. This is very important. You cannot change or edit your application after hitting the Submit Application button. I'm going to say it one more time. You cannot change or edit your application after hitting the Submit Application button. Be sure to review the entire application before submitting, especially since multiple users can work on it at once. So for example, if someone has typed into a narrative question the text, staff will fill this in later, that will register as an answered question, even if that's the only text in there. This is not a joke. We have seen it happen many times. We really recommend that you go through and you review the entire application before you submit, because once again, you cannot edit it once you have submitted. Once you do submit the application, the active users listed on your account will get a confirmation email. Save this email for your records. If you do not receive the confirmation email, check your junk mail folder and make sure that you actually submitted the application. This email also contains a link to an optional post-application survey, which we hope you will take the time to fill out. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions flagged for me to answer. Can I hop on the video? Let's see. Okay, we've got some questions here, or at least one. Can activities like book clubs and museum field trips for youth qualify as arts and cultural programming? Yes, both of those activities qualify as arts and cultural programming. Hey, it looks like Jody Sperling just asked, is there a blank application available for download? There is an application worksheet which contains all of the questions. I believe that it's currently linked in the chat. It's certainly in our applying page. We don't have a PDF of the application itself, but the application worksheet and the budget worksheet do contain all of the questions and instructions that can be found in the application. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions, so I'm going to go off video and continue with the presentation. Next slide, please. As you begin your application, make sure to refer to the definitions and examples of the evaluative criteria provided in the guidelines. Again, those criteria are public service and impact, organizational accountability, and quality. These criteria will be used by the panelists to assess your application, and your application must speak to them in detail. Each of the criteria include instructions to show your equity and accessibility activity and plans as it relates to your public programming and your organizational structure. We recognize that every organization is at a particular point in this arc, and we expect you to accurately show your current state as well as your aspirations, including evidence of how you plan on achieving your goals. Next slide, please. As you define your public service and impact and craft your project proposal, be sure to include your organization's actual mission statement and ensure that your proposed project clearly fulfills that mission. Remember, the focus of CDF support is artistic and cultural services to the public. We look to the applicant to define its public and describe the access that it provides. Include as many details as you can about the audience currently served by your organization, as well as the audience that you intend to serve with your proposed project. Describe how you will reach the audience before, during, and after your program. DCLA funds projects of both breadth and depth. Those that reach a broad range of people, as well as those that provide a depth of service for a small number of people. Your public could be anything from 5 participants in a series of workshops, to 200 people in an outdoor presentation, to 1,000 New York City school children attending a concert. Next slide, please. Some things to keep in mind when working on your project narrative. Organizations may request support for a single project, which we've talked about a little bit already through the Q&As. Explain why your project is important and specify how it will serve your intended audience, your identified audience. Your project proposal should contain a high level of detail. In determining the proposed programming and crafting the descriptions entered in the section, please be mindful of the available character limits and how to best present a clear, comprehensive description of all elements that you are proposing within the space provided. If your project contains multiple components, make sure that each component has the requisite amount of detail. We understand that some specifics might not be confirmed when the application is submitted. When this is the case, be sure to include as much detail as you can regarding which steps will be taken, when this is the case, be sure to include as much detail as you can regarding what steps you will take to make the project a reality, including how and when key decisions will be made and who the key decision makers are. The how can be just as important as the what. One of the ways to demonstrate public service and impact is to include the goals you have set for your proposed project in the project description, along with the evaluative methods you plan to use to measure impact. If your organization has provided the same or similar services in the past, you may include metrics, quantitative and/or qualitative data to help highlight the program outcomes. Finally, and this is another very important thing, don't include ineligible activities in your synopsis, project description, or project budget. This can hurt your score significantly. For example, if you're producing a play in New York City, and then we'll be touring that play nationally following its run in New York City, we recommend that you leave the national run out of your project description. Instead, focus only on what you will be doing within the 5 boroughs in fiscal year 2027. And including the context of the national tour may make it more difficult for panelists to evaluate your New York City impact and eligibility of your project. If, for some reason, you must reference ineligible activity, be sure to clarify that the information is just for context and that you're not seeking funds for the ineligible activity. Once again, this is just in your project description, project synopsis, and project budget. You can, of course, include context about the overall scope of your organization and other narrative questions like the mission and history. Next slide, please. A few additional tips as you are populating other application fields. You should give relevant examples of previous activities that relate to the project your organization is proposing. In response to the disability access question, highlight your accessibility measures that go beyond ADA compliance. You can include, but are not limited to, efforts to better accommodate the disability community, efforts to adapt program delivery for audiences with disabilities, or you might highlight collaborations or partnerships within the disability community. Please check the guidelines for more examples. Be sure to use current language to describe your activities, demographics, and communities served. Think about using terms that are inclusive, asset-based, and people-first. Please refer to the FAQ document on our website for examples. A link to that document can also now be found in the chat. And finally, we understand that some applicants may find generative AI or large language models useful for crafting narrative responses for our application. While we don't prohibit their use, we also don't encourage it. As of now, AI-generated responses are often easy to spot because they provide general information that is not specific to an organization and can be inaccurate when analyzing budgets, such as identifying surpluses when there are deficits and so on. If you choose to use an AI tool, please make sure you review any output for accuracy, clarity, and adapt responses so they provide details specific to your organization. Think of it as reviewing your coworker's work. As we said, you should look through the whole application before you submit, and that is especially true if you're using AI. Next slide, please. Beyond the content of your application, consider the presentation of your proposal. In this screen, you can see 2 identical texts. The one on the left includes paragraph breaks, and information is highlighted by the judicious use of capital letters. On the right is a dense paragraph peppered with ampersands and abbreviations, but containing exactly the same information. The one on the left allows the reader, or the panelist, to find key information on the page. The other makes it far too difficult to do that, making it harder for panelists to read. Make sure that your text is easily legible. Use appropriate spacing and paragraph breaks, which only count as a single character, and note that some formatting tools, such as bold, italics, and underline, are unavailable in the application. If you copy and paste, the text may not appear as you entered it in a word processing program. you can use the gray Download PDF button found at the top of each application page to preview what the text looks like and edit accordingly. Also, do not embed links in any of your narrative questions. Panelists are told not to review any links included in these written responses. Instead, we have designated space for links in the supplemental materials section of the application. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to get back on video and see if there are any questions. Where we hold our programming is not indicative of the community we're serving due to scarce venue space appropriate for our programming, e.g. dance studios. How can we not have the location of our programming count against us? This is a good question. The location of your programming, you should describe where your programming is happening, and you should also describe how you're reaching your audience. So if the community is having to travel to another neighborhood or another borough, you should describe how you're making that easy, how you advertising the audience to them, advertising the programming and the venue to them. So what you really have to do is always speak to how you're reaching your intended community and your intended public, even if that location is not directly in the neighborhood. And you should also be clear that you are serving a different neighborhood. So if your intended audience is not where your program is happening, you should draw that distinction and say, like, we may be doing it in Flatiron, but our intended audience is from Brownsville or something like that, however you want to do that. When will this recording and slides be available, and where will this be available on the DCLA website? I can't give an exact time, as we have to close caption it and get it downloaded and everything, but we hopefully within the next week, and it will be put on our applying webpage on the website. If the programming is for a cohort of participants through an open application system, must the application be open to the public during the grant period? This is a good question. I think there's a little bit of context and nuance here, so I would really recommend that you contact the CDF help desk. But broadly speaking, if the activity that the participants are receiving is within the grant period, then the application, it does not matter when the application is open, as long as like what they're receiving. The application itself is not the service, but it's just about when they're getting the service, the public service after the application, that has to be within the grant period. But if there's a little bit of nuance here, so I would recommend contacting your program officer or the help desk too. Are we allowed to sell tickets for the program for which we are asking for funding for? Yes. The event being free is not a requirement of CDF funding. Is the percent breakdown of funded programs across the 5 example program areas as specified in the guidelines? For example, 10% towards artist dialogue, 10% towards arts education. Is there a percent breakdown of funded programs? So just reading the question one more time. We don't break down our funding in that way. Our funding is determined by panel score and your budget bucket or your budget band or your budget category. We don't section off the CDF budget towards specific purposes, with the exception of the Language Access Fund, Disability Forward Fund, and some other things, which we'll talk about later. But in terms of the broader baseline support that CDF supports, we don't section it off based on discipline or program area or anything like that. Okay, no open questions at this time, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ladan, for her to take the baton from here.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dylan. I'm Ladan. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also here as one of the co-directors of the Program Services Unit at DCLA. I'm going to turn my camera on to give you a visual description. I've got the same lovely blue background with the DCLA and the city logo in white. I am an Iranian American woman. I wear glasses. I have long, sort of wavy brown hair, and I'm wearing a black sweater today. And I've also got a kind of headset with one of these mics that goes in front of your face. All right, I'm going to turn my video back off until we get to the questions, and we will keep going with our presentation. Thank you for all your fantastic questions so far and for sticking with us. Please do stay till the end. And we're going to go to the next slide. So we're going to move forward to discuss the amount you will request from CDF and completing the required budgets in a couple of slides. But before we do that, however, we're going to provide a short overview of some of the other funding streams that are available through or administered by our agency. And this is kind of maybe like a side quest around the exact application form, but these are really important things that we wanted to make sure that everybody is familiar with in this webinar. So first, we're going to talk about the Create NYC initiatives, which are the Language Access Fund, LAF, or Disability Forward Fund, DFF. And then I'm going to talk about City Council discretionary funding that gets administered by our agency. So following recommendations made in the Create NYC Cultural Plan released in July 2017, the Language Access Fund and Disability Forward Fund were launched to support both new and ongoing programmatic efforts to engage New Yorkers in these communities. When available, funding is provided for these initiatives. So to be considered for LAF or DFF, you must describe those related activities in the project description section of your application. So it has to be part of what you're proposing for CDF funding in general. And there is a question in the application that asks you to indicate whether or not you are doing activity that comports with either LAF, DFF, or both. So if you get to that question and you say yes, you'll be prompted to answer a further question summarizing the programming and indicating more information on the nature of the activity, specifically like what particular languages that you are working in, or what disability communities you're targeting. And you can kind of use language throughout the application. You don't have to like recreate language about this for this part of the question, but if you have something that you've already used in your project description, you can use that to respond to either of these questions. And we do recommend that you please review the guidelines if you want more information about this and how to be considered. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how City Council funds are allocated through our agency. We are doing this because we have requirements for City Council funding that we administer. They interconnect with our CDF requirements and do impact how some CDF applicants complete their budgets, because I'm going to talk about budgets in a minute. So everyone that's hearing my voice on this webinar or reading the captioning of my words on this webinar is welcome to hear this information, listen to it, and then on this and the next two slides in case it is useful for you for this or future grant cycles, but it is only immediately relevant for FY27 CDF applicants that already submitted an FY27 City Council discretionary funding application. If you did not submit an FY27 City Council discretionary funding application, that's okay. You don't have to. You can still apply to this grant for CDF. In fact, the majority of our grantees only get funding through our agency through CDF. They don't get City Council discretionary funding. And so none of this might apply to you. But you can do that, you just won't be eligible for FY27 discretionary funding administered through agency from the City Council. And maybe that's fine because that's not what you're interested in. But anybody who is interested in that or is projecting to receive that or did fill out that City Council discretionary funding application for FY27, I'm going to talk about that now. So obviously the Department of Cultural Affairs is a mayoral agency. We're overseen by the mayor, and we work closely with our partners in the City Council to ensure compliance, inform policy, and administer funds, among other work. The New York City Council consists of elected representatives from each of the 51 council districts comprising the 5 boroughs. And you can visit the City Council website to identify the council members for the districts where you're based or where you provide services, and be in touch with their offices to learn more about any unique requirements they may have. And for your convenience, we have a link to the City Council website included in the chat. The support and partnership of the City Council, its speaker, and its Cultural Affairs Committee is critical to our funding process. They devote considerable funding to culture throughout the 5 boroughs, so we do recommend that you keep them informed of your events and programs, both to seek funds and to report on your activities. You never know what might spark an interest from your elected official. DCLA administers several different and distinct funds for cultural activities. To be eligible for any FY27 council support that is administered by DCLA, your organization must submit both a City Council discretionary funding application, which was due in February, and a complete and eligible FY27 CDF application. So the CDF application is required for any grants that our agency administers, unless you're a member of the CIG, but for everybody else, CDF application is required. If you do not submit a CDF application, or you submit and your organization is deemed ineligible, you're not eligible to receive any funds through DCLA in this fiscal year, though it is possible for you to receive funds through other city agencies. So this is specifically for DCLA. Next slide, please. So City Council discretionary support administered through DCLA usually takes one of two different forms. So we're going to use these terms. I'm going to define them, and hopefully this will be fairly clear once we get through the explanation. But we use a term called member item support, and then we also have initiative support. So on this slide, we're explaining the member item funds, and in the following slide, I'll discuss the 5 initiatives. Each individual member of the City Council may designate cultural organizations for support in their council district, which is known as member item support. And when these member items are administered through DCLA, they are most often included with your CDF award, and therefore must support the project proposed in your CDF application. It gets combined together as one total. So that's when we're talking about member items, that's the kind of thing we're talking about, money that gets added to or is part of a CDF grant. Next slide, please. In addition to the discretionary support that goes to CDF activities, the City Council has created a number of separate initiatives. These provide single-year support for specific purposes. For fiscal 27, we anticipate that these will include the same 5 that we've been administering for the past few years. That includes CASA, the Coalition of Theaters of Color, Cultural Immigrant Initiative, SUCASA, and Violence Prevention and Intervention for Youth and Young Adults. This is the program formerly known as Anti-Gun Violence Art, a Catalyst for Change. While the Council designs these initiatives and designates who will receive funds under them, our agency administers them. Unlike member items, these initiative-funded projects cannot be the same as any CDF-funded activities. They can't overlap, so do not include them in your CDF application. Again, to be eligible for any council support that is designated through DCLA, whether for CDF activities or for one or more of the council initiatives, you are required to submit, complete and submit both the FY27 CDF application by the April 2nd deadline, and to have already submitted the council's discretionary funding application, which was due February 18th. That council discretionary funding application is not required if you're not interested or expecting to receive any city council discretionary support. So if you're just going to submit that CDF application, you can do that. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. I know we took a little side quest about city council and other streams of funding. I'm going to turn my camera back on, and we're going to look for questions that have been flagged for me. Okay, we have a membership system that is accessible to the public and to cultivate concert-going habits. The program we are applying for is available for members and for the general public to buy tickets for. Does this disqualify us for applying? Not necessarily. Obviously, as you know, as both Claudia and Dylan have already kind of talked about in the webinar, what we fund is public service. So what you are applying for has to be something that is accessible to the public within the grant period and in your city. And the evaluative criteria require you to present those programming in consideration for affordability, accessibility, and equity, among many other criteria. So if you have something that is accessible to the public, but then there's also like a subgroup of people that have additional access or have a membership, you definitely want to make sure that if you're applying for this kind of thing, you're clear about how do people become members? What is the cost to become a member, if any? What is the qualifications for it? How are people accessing it if they're not a member? A lot of questions that might come up about it for the panel because they're looking for that answer to that question about how accessible is this? What is the impact of it? Who is getting the service that you're proposing to do. So that's a sort of general question or answer to your question, but I would recommend that you contact your program officer or this help desk and get a little bit more information about exactly how your project works, so we can give you a little bit more specific guidance on that. Okay, next question says, somebody thanks Rachel for answering their question earlier. Thank you, Rachel. The question is, does applying or becoming a panelist for CDF help, hurt, or have no impact on applying for a grant because of the conflict of interest? It has no impact. You would never serve on a panel that would be reviewing your own application. So that's a way that we prevent that. You also, anybody who is on the panel that has a conflict of interest with your organization would be asked to recuse themselves, and they would not participate in the scoring or the discussion of that. But we do have a peer panel process. And who are the peers in the peer panel process? It's you. It's all of your peers. So if you are an applicant, then you're probably somebody who you should consider thinking about whether or not you want to be a panelist. We would love to get your submission and consider if it works out with your schedule and your level of expertise. So yes, a lot of panelists are people who work at grantee or applicant organizations. That is not going to impact your own application. The next question that says, are funds for LAF or DFF in addition to the bucket that would be allocated for CDF? If an organization does not apply for these funds, might it negatively impact public service or impact criteria for evaluation? So I'm going to answer the second part of your question first, which is no. If you're not doing anything that is targeting the areas that are targeted by LAF or DFF, that does not negatively impact the public service and impact criteria for evaluation, because you can be doing a ton of things that are really providing a lot of service and impact that don't necessarily fall into those sort of specific categories. So you don't have to do that. But if you do something that is along those lines, then yes, you can consider, indicate that you want to be considered for that. And if it's available, it's usually coming from additional funding that's added to our budget at adoption. So if it's available and you qualify and you're considered for it and then you get it, it would be in addition to a baseline funding that's sort of determined by the budget category. And I'm going to talk a little bit more specifics about this. And we also get into this a little bit more specifically in the budget tutorial. So plug for that. Hang on, we're going to talk about that in a second, but that's basically the main answer. Okay, so the next question says, do you recommend applying for a multi-year or a single-year award if we expect to qualify for a higher baseline award in the future, i.e. due to an organizational budget that increased from 24 to 25? Okay, great question. You do not apply for multi-year funds. You apply for a project that is occurring in FY27, and you are either automatically or not considered for multi-year. So if you're coming to the panel for review in FY24, that will be the budget that determines your budget category and your history of funding, and basically those other criteria that I think Claudia talked about and that are also in the guidelines will determine whether or not you are considered for multi-year funding. You get it or you don't, but you should not ask for a project that is over multiple years. You should ask for a project that is happening within the fiscal year. So I guess the sort of subtext to your question is you can't game the system and ask for 1 year so that you can come back next year and qualify for a higher baseline. If you're applying this year, FY24 will determine your budget category. And if you're eligible for it, you'll get a multi-year or you won't. And if you don't want it, then you don't get that funding for this year. So you maybe want to skip this year. But if you want funding for FY27, that's going to be how it goes. Okay, so it says, my organization applied for FY27 discretionary funding. So do we need to apply for CDF in order to receive a city council grant? You don't need to apply to CDF in order to receive the city council grant. You need to apply to CDF in order to receive the city council money through DCLA. If you don't want money through DCLA, you could get that money through another city agency, DYCD, the Department of Youth and Community Development, DFTA. All of these other agencies also administer contracts that are designated city council discretionary funding. But if you want money through the Department of Cultural Affairs, you have to do the CDF application. And then in addition to that, if you want some of that money to be city council money, you have to have done the discretionary funding application. So we're talking about CDF because that's the way you get DCLA administered funding. I hope that that's clear. So the question says, so we should not include the activities that we included in our City Council initiative application, even if we have no indication or feel it is unlikely that we will receive the City Council funding. Good question. Yeah, probably this is something that you want to talk to your program officer about more specifically. Initiative funding obviously is completely at the discretion of the City Council. We don't know who's going to get it for 27. You submit the discretionary funding application and they kind of decide amongst themselves or how they decide what they want to do and how much money there is. So I definitely would make sure that you're being clear in your proposal that this is for CDF and this is for, if it's something that you were like intending to use for an initiative, then the likely answer is no, don't include that. But yeah, I would probably say talk to your program officer, or if you don't have one, email the help desk and we can get a little bit more information and try to give you a little bit more specific guidance. Okay, the question says, we applied for a program with the City Council discretionary fund in February. Can we apply to CDF with the same program? So as I said, if you anticipate that City Council discretionary funding that you applied for is going to be administered as a member item, it's not one of the 5 initiatives that I mentioned, then yeah, it has to be the same, because if you get it and you apply for CDF, it would get combined and with a CDF grant or included in a CDF grant and before the CDF proposed programming. So if it's not an initiative, CASA, SUCASA, Immigrant, Coalition of Theaters of Color, Violence Prevention, yes, it should be for the same project. And it should also make sure that it complies with all of our other eligibility. But another question that I think would be good if you ask your program officer for clarity, and if you don't have one, you can email the help desk for a little bit more clarity on that. Okay, so we're going to pause the questions now, and I'm going to go back to the webinar. We'll take more questions later. Don't worry. I'm going to turn my camera back off, and we're going to keep going with our presentation. Next slide, please. So back to the CDF application and your request amount. All applicants, regardless of whether they are anticipating City Council member items, must enter a CDF request amount. $0 requests will not be reviewed by a panel and are ineligible for CDF baseline funds. Don't ask for $0. Please ask for some money. Otherwise, you're not going to get any money because you didn't ask for any. So ask for some money. Don't ask for $0. And sorry to say that this has happened. So we do want to emphasize it. You'll enter your request amount in the request amount field in the project summary overview section of the CDF application. The number that you enter in this field will populate the Department of Cultural Affairs / Cultural Development Fund line item in your project budget. So it does kind of, you enter it in one place at the beginning of the section, and you'll see that it's going to pre-populate the appropriate income field for DCLA in the project budget. So you want to make sure that you've reviewed this number in both locations, make sure it's what you want it to be before you submit your application. The figure you enter is the amount you are requesting for this CDF fiscal year. Refer to the guidelines for information on making an appropriate request for your budget size. And as we discussed earlier in this webinar, we publish maximum and minimum baseline awards amounts by budget category to help guide your request. And this is sort of similar to coming back to a question that somebody had asked. If you expect to receive City Council member item support administered by DCLA, LAF or DFF funding, or equity funding, you'll include that in your CDF project request and explain what you've included in your budget notes. And there's more information on all of these potential sources in the guidelines. City Council initiative funding, on the other hand, should not be included in your request amount or your project budget. You'll actually see there's a line for it because it's obviously a category, but you can't even enter anything in the project budget. It's totally grayed out and not editable because you're not supposed to include it. Don't include it. Next slide, please. Okay, so a few tips as you are working on your budget figures and notes. The application requires annual operating budgets for your overall organization and a budget specific to the project you're proposing. The organizational budget should reflect your fiscal year, and the project budget should reflect the city's fiscal year, which is July 1 to June 30th. That's the grant period. That's why the project budget should align with the city's fiscal year. We suggest working on your budgets offline first. You can use your own Excel document, or we have a budget worksheet available on our applying page that we made for this purpose, so you can use that. Some reminders, as Dylan mentioned, the application form times out after 30 minutes, so be sure to save. This is a particularly useful tool because as we said, just typing into the fields doesn't count as activity. And so if you're working on the budget section, this might be a section where it might take you a little bit longer to fill it out. And you don't want to get closed out in the middle of figuring out your budget. So save frequently. You'll enter your CDF grant request amount in the request amount field in the project overview section. That figure will populate your project budget, as I said, in that Department of Cultural Affairs CDF line. It does not populate the organizational budget section. That's a completely different section of the application. So make sure to confirm that the request amount aligns between your project and organizational budgets. If you request $0 one more time, your application will be disqualified and will not be reviewed by the panelists. So don't do that, please. Note that DCLA cannot fund more than 75% of the total cost of a project. And any received or projected City Council initiative income, as I said, should not be listed in your project budget. Those awards must not overlap with your CDF programs. However, if you get it, or you're thinking you might get some, it should be included in your organizational budget because that's for the whole organization. On the organizational budget and project summary sections of the application, you can click on a red budget overview button that's at the top of the screen, and that allows you to review your annual operating and project budgets next to each other, very similar to the way the panel reviews it. And that's a good way to see if all of the numbers between the sections are really making sense together. Also, want to note that the budget notes are a whole section. And they're really an opportunity for you to contextualize the numeric information provided in your budgets in narrative form. You want to make sure that the budget notes are complete, thorough, respond to the questions asked, and explain any apparent anomalies or discrepancies in your budgets. The organizational and project budgets are two key sections used by panelists to evaluate applications under the organizational accountability criterion. Please review our guidelines, the budget worksheet, and this supplemental 25-minute budget tutorial video for more in-depth guidance on completing your budgets. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about programmatic background materials now, which are also a component of a complete and competitive application. Applicants must submit programmatic background materials in a single PDF file of no more than 10 pages. Your programmatic background materials should establish your arts and cultural activity and public engagement over the last 2 to 3 years. Materials should relate to your proposed project as much as possible, and your submission will be shared with panelists and will contribute to the evaluation of your proposal. Programmatic background materials should provide a sense of your proposed project and the people involved, including audiences. And you can include, but are not limited to, things like materials that demonstrate programmatic activity, marketing and audience engagement, or educational activity. There are a lot of examples in the guidelines. And again, here, please do not include hyperlinks. Don't send just a PDF of hyperlinks. Panelists are instructed to view what is in the PDF, but not click on tons of links. I'm going to get to a place where you can put some links in a second, but the background materials should be visual, artist bios, curricula, photos, programs, things that like you can look at in a PDF. Don't just click, don't put a lot of a thing of just hyperlinks, please. Next slide, please. So In addition to the programmatic background materials, which are required, you can share up to 2 work samples. And now work samples are optional. You will not be penalized if you do not include one, but the work samples are an additional opportunity to demonstrate to panelists the mission-based work that you do and may include up to 2 minutes of audio-visual recordings, up to 2 pages of photo documentation, and up to 2 pages of a writing sample or manuscript. Please do not include a link to a folder or a file for download on cloud-based storage platforms like Dropbox or Google Drive. That's not what this is for. Panelists are instructed not to review these. Panelists will also be instructed not to peruse general organizational websites or social media pages. So don't just give me your Facebook page or your Instagram. You want to include, or just your website. There's other places in the application for you to do that. That's why you don't have to do it here. It's not what this is for. Don't include URLs that are not work samples. So the other thing to note is that links to materials must be publicly accessible and not password protected through 2026. So please do check that. If you put a link in there that needs a password, we're not going to call you and ask you for the password. The panel's just not going to look at it because they can't access it. So don't make something that's password protected or not accessible through 2026 because the panels are going through into the fall. And there's a lot more information in the guidelines and descriptions of appropriate work samples. So I'll refer you back to there if you want more information. Next slide, please. Overall, a competitive application is comprehensive. The components should interrelate, make sense, and holistically describe both your organization and your proposed project. The evaluative criteria of public service and impact, organizational accountability, and quality should be reflected throughout your application, along with your commitment to access, equity, and inclusion. So those are things you want to think about in terms of like the metaphor that we like to use of the oatmeal raisin cookie. In the cookie dough, cinnamon is really permeates throughout the dough. This is how you want to think about these components. They should be the cinnamon in your oatmeal raisin cookie, as opposed to the raisins, which while they're in the dough, they're visible. They can be easily picked out and tossed off. So the criteria and values should permeate all aspects of your organization and application. Next slide, please. So as you think about how all sections of your application come together and the collective story they tell, it is sometimes helpful to think about how the application content is seen by the panelists, which differs slightly from how you enter it online. So on this slide and the next, we have screenshots of the panelist view application, which is also available on the applying page of our website. We're sharing these so you can see how the information is presented to the panelists. Next slide, please. So here are a couple other pages from the panelist view application, including the budget, and a link to this resource can also be found in the chat. So on the right-hand side here, you can see what I'm talking about with regard to the budget. This is how the panel sees it. This is going to have a lot to do, very similar look to the budget overview, which is why you want to maybe use that as you're filling your numbers out. Next slide, please. All right. If your organization is funded, congratulations, amazing. And you know, you guys are all at this webinar, so you're obviously going to do a great job. So if you're funded, notification will take place after the grant period has begun. This year, you will not know if you have been awarded funds likely until late fall or early winter, even for programs that take place in the summer. So please plan accordingly. We expect each grantee to move forward with the activities proposed, regardless of the size of the DCLA award or the timing of our payments. Funds may not move as swiftly as you or we would like. We understand this is a difficult or challenging thing, but we work as hard as we can to get that notification out as early as possible, and then for all of the funded organizations to get those initial payments out as soon as possible. So we do appreciate your understanding here. Generally, 80% of the grant is paid as early in the fiscal year as possible as an initial payment. And then the remaining 20% is paid out upon completion of services and approval of final reports. So there is always going to be a part of this money that is in reimbursement after you've reported at the end of the year. In some years, there were budget adjustments mid-year that increased or decreased payments slightly. And when that happens, we usually make those adjustments when we issue final payments. Next slide, please. oops, sorry. We do have a little bit more about if your organization is funded. You have to have adequate insurance to cover your activities. We expect you to be ADA compliant, and funded organizations must also follow DCLA's policy for acknowledging the receipt of these funds by including the DCLA logo and appropriate credit language in digital and printed materials. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I want to give you one last reminder that everything we just covered needs to be submitted by 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Thursday, April 2nd, 2026, to meet the application deadline and to be eligible for funding. We just spent an hour and a half talking about all of this stuff, and none of it matters if you don't submit the application by the deadline. So don't forget, this is not the first day you can submit. This is the last day that you can submit. Please don't wait until the last minute. All right, I'm going to answer some remaining questions that have come in the Q&A. So submit any general questions that you have. All right, let's see. If we apply for DFF funding for our project, what appropriate number should we add onto the baseline amount? If it's available, if it's in the past when it's been available, LAF and DFF funds have been allocated at $10,000. So that's possibly a guide for you. It definitely, oh, let me turn my camera back on while we're talking. But yeah, that's the history of that funding in the last few years has been at $10,000 increments. Allison says, does being a previous multi-year funder help increase our odds for award this year, or is our history with DCLA not considered? As we said in the beginning, and I think a couple of other times, you have different eligibility for award sizes and multi-year funds, depending on your funding history. But previous funding is no guarantee of future funding. You're coming back to panel for the competitive review. Your application is being considered on its own merits and not in comparison to any previous submission or your previous funding history. The panel will see it in your budget, but that's not one of the criteria, whether or not you've been funded before. So look at the evaluative criteria, present the most competitive application that you can, and the panel will review it on its merits as per the criteria. Question says, can one request a grant amount larger than our baseline maximum amount? Technically, yes. And most of the time that should be because you are expecting city council funding, which you can explain in the notes. Or for example, if you anticipate that you are, you want to receive LAF or DFF or maybe one of the equity funds because you've received it before. But obviously that is something that you really want to make sure is clear in your budget notes. If it's above the maximum amount that's published in your budget category, so the panel understands why you've asked for that amount of money. Okay, so the question says, does the member item amount go into your DCLA request? If your level is max 60, do I add the amount of the member item support on top of that, or is it part of that amount? It should be incorporated in your request total. And then there's a section of the budget notes that allows you to indicate if part of your request includes city council member item funding, and if so, how much and from whom, if you know. So if you're you want to include it, make sure it's included. It's not separate from, it's part of the request. Question says, we are an organization with a $10 million budget, but only $200,000 of our budget goes towards arts and culture. Which figure should I go by when looking at the published maximum baseline award amounts? So this makes me think that your primary mission is not arts and culture. So you would be applying as that non-arts and culture type organization that Claudia described. You're going to check that as one of the org types on the application, and you will be considered based on the cultural budget, which is that $200,000 figure. So that'll be the figure that you go by when looking at the published minimum and maximum baseline award amounts, because that's essentially your cultural operating budget. We have applied for city discretionary funding for one of our programs. I understand that this needs to be reflected in our CDF application. For the CDF application, we are planning to apply for support for our full NYC program. Would it be acceptable if the project we applied for through discretionary funding is one component of the broader NYC program, including in the CDF application? Yeah, sure. If it's going to be one of those member item type city council discretionary funds and not an initiative, and it's going to be part of a CDF award if you get funded. Yeah, that doesn't have to be, and you want to basically apply for a project that has multiple components, one of which is the one that you think you're going to get some city council money for, and fill in the blank number of other ones are not part of that. Yeah, that's definitely something that's possible. I would recommend that you talk to your program officer or if you don't have one, email the help desk, and if you have more questions about that. But yeah, if it's in there, it's okay. It doesn't have to be the only thing. Let's see, question says, so that brings down the amount of support we can get from DCLA. If we get 425 in member item support, so you cannot support us with more than 35, even if we received more last year. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question, but essentially the panel is not considering any money that you might be getting from city council in their scoring. Again, if you're projecting to get city council funding, that's not necessarily one of the criteria that they're evaluating you against or your application against. But yeah, maybe email the help desk and we can get a little bit of understanding better of your question. But yeah, it's a separately adjudicated thing, the city council, however they decide how they want to give money. So the panel is not saying, oh, well, this group got member item, we're not going to give them a high score because they don't need this money. Financial need is not one of the criteria. Whether or not you got city council money is not one of the criteria. But how much you ask for within your budget and how you've explained that and how clear is how you've responded to the criteria of public service and impact, organizational accountability and quality are. So that's how I would close that out. And always email the help desk or your program officer if you have any other questions. Okay, I think that's the last question that was flagged for me. I'm going to turn my camera back off and we're going to close out and say, I want to thank again the Ecuadorian American Cultural Center for providing footage from Aya Zamana at the beginning of this presentation. We hope you enjoyed that. And thank you again to all of you for attending the FY27 CDF webinar. Once you complete your application, please be sure to fill out our application survey. A link will be provided in the confirmation email that you will receive after your application is submitted. And we do value feedback on your experience and we do take it into consideration in future years. So plug for the survey, please fill it out. It's very, very short. A final reminder, we have a list of tools on our website that you should definitely use that are linked here again in the chat. Excuse me. So that's going to be in the chat or on our website. As we said, this session has been recorded. It will be linked on our website. The video will have closed captioning that can be translated into different languages in the YouTube interface. Look for the FAQs on our website. There's more information on our website. Usually just go to the website. You can find almost anything that you might need. We also want you to look for updates in our weekly reminder emails that are going to go out during the open application period. One more shout out to the budget and application worksheets. Please use them. Actually, fun fact, direct reflection of feedback that we got from previous applicants. That's why we have it. So that's proof that we listen to the feedback from the surveys. If you would like additional guidance on completing your budget, you can view our budget tutorial that we talked about. That's linked in the chat. There's that panelist view application. And we also are going to have 3 more webinars, March 12th, March 16th, and March 25th. Tell a friend if you found this helpful. We do encourage and recommend all applicants come to one of these, even if you've applied before. And if you need any further clarification after looking at all of the resources coming to a webinar, you can always participate in virtual office hours. That's going to take place on March 19th. And registration links for both the webinars and the office hours are posted on our website. And if you need any other support, please contact your program officer via email or the help desk email. Again, cdfhelpdesk@culture.nyc.gov. And with that, thank you again. And this concludes this webinar. Have a great day, everybody.